Welcome to the Six Hats podcast, where I, Dr. Shami, a lifestyle and nutritional medicine family doctor, will talk about how women strive to find balance each day by juggling their six roles, being a woman, mother, daughter, partner, business owner, and professional. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Six Hats podcast. And today we're going to explore a fascinating yet often overlooked aspect of healthcare. Now, when was the last time your doctor, when they prescribed a medication, talked about nutrient deficiencies as a result of the drug? And this is why it's so important to have this conversation. And today I have Ves Ceranic. He brings a wealth of knowledge from his background in biomedical sciences, pharmaceuticals, and naturopathy. So he's currently practicing as naturopath at Pier Street Chiropractic Clinic in Altona. He's passionate about patient-centered care and strives for holistic health solutions. So welcome, Ves.
Cheers. Thanks, Dr. Shami. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So I've been excited about this conversation because we're not having it. It's not something that's routinely discussed. When I really reflect on my training 24 years ago, we were experts in prescribing meds, and it was very quick. It was in like 5 to 10 minute consults. Never did I think initially in my training that medication can result in side effects due to nutrient depletion. And it's only after going into integrative medicine, it was a massive wake-up call. And even just looking at polypharmacy, especially patients going to their 60s, 70s, there's a lot of polypharmacy. I'm talking about 6 to 7 different types of medication and how that is depleting nutrients, resulting in so many other symptoms that's presenting. And so you're caught up in a rat race of what's next. I'm trying to combat this symptom, but I'm also trying to treat that. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. So a great place to start is, how do pharmaceuticals deplete nutrients? It's a very broad question, but if we could give a brief idea of how that happens.
I'll go back one step. You sort of hit the nail on the head. It's nutrient depletion can come from a wide variety of sources. So from pathophysiological, so chronic stress, for example, everyone's got some sort of a degree of chronic stress in their lives, especially post-COVID, to what we're discussing today, basically, which is prescribed pharmaceuticals for chronic ailments. Basically, it all comes down to the biochemical and biophysiological pathways of a lot of these chemicals and the receptors that they interact with throughout the body, because a lot of these receptors have cofactors that are required, that are essential for them to work, enzymes that require proteins and also cofactors to work. And a lot of these cofactors are things like nutrients, like magnesium, like CoQ10, like folate, folinic acid, these sorts of things. So when a medication is taken that has a certain chemical structure and it integrates and interacts with various receptors of these types, then you're going to get some unfortunate or some degree of nutrient depletion inadvertently. So that's where sort of pharmaceuticals come from anyway in terms of nutrient depletion. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, we are going to go and talk about the common pharmaceuticals. But before I do that, I think it's really nice for our listeners to get an idea of what nutrient depletion actually looks like in terms of, if you talk about magnesium, like magnesium's needed over 600 chemical reactions, and it's easily lost at times of stress, but also choice of food, caffeine, alcohol. But how does that play out in symptoms?
Well, definitely. So that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in some of the groups of medications that are sort of selected for today's podcast. There's so many medications that are prescribed on a day-to-day basis. However, I've sort of selected the top 5 groups. And these top 5 groups have evidence-based medicines that are backing the research that's shown of this nutrient depletion. And that's where I talk about the link, what I just mentioned before. So if the chemical pathway, or if you know the pharmacological structure of the medication that you're prescribing, and then you know how it's pharmacokinetically and dynamically interacting with the body, and then you're basically also going to know what nutrients it's sort of going to deplete in that. In this instance, we're talking about, or you've mentioned magnesium. So the patient's going to present to the pharmacy with a plethora of issues like what you talked about before. But we may as well just start with...
Yeah, let's do that.
We may as well just start with magnesium because you sort of brought it up. So one of the things that I've brought up or wanted to talk about, it's probably not it's not the medication that I love seeing prescribed the most, but they're PPIs.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, proton pump inhibitors. So things like pantoprazole, esomeprazole, omeprazole, they're used for a wide variety of gastric conditions. And they basically block the hydrogen potassium ATPase, which is the first series of steps in the reaction on phosphorylation of magnesium ATPase as a subunit. This ultimately leads to a inhibition of gastric acid and pepsin. And because you get reduction in this, you're also getting an increase in pH, which if you take a PPI for a chronic number of years, then you're going to get things like achlorhydria, so a reduction in hydrochloric acid. And without hydrochloric acid and a lowered pH level, you're not getting absorption of foodstuffs. So you're not getting a breakdown of those foodstuffs and then an absorption of those nutrients. These can be macromolecules like proteins and amino acids. And then in our case, what we're talking about is the reduction in magnesium, unfortunately. So it's specifically in this instance been shown to inactivate or inhibit the active transport of magnesium in the small intestine. And by reducing that, you're getting over years and years and years. And the majority of these cases that we're going to talk about today, I'm not talking about a once-off use. We're talking about chronic conditions that have been chronically prescribed medications. So years of a gastric ulcer, 7+ years of prescribed PPIs, a person will most definitely lead to something called hypomagnesemia, which is a reduction in magnesium in the serum. And like you just mentioned before, magnesium is a central cofactor in so many enzymatic processes and in many different biochemical pathways in the body, from coagulation pathways to glycolysis to neurochemical and neuromuscular transmissions. But using PPIs chronically, it tends to lead, especially with magnesium, to an electrolyte imbalance. And more specifically, that electrolyte imbalance is hypocalcemia, so reduction in calcium. And studies have shown, especially long-term studies with PPIs, have shown that people taking PPIs for more than 7 years or 7+ years, it can lead to things like osteopenia and osteoporosis. So there's your link there between someone presenting to your clinic or to your pharmacy or to your healthcare center with bone issues, and there's your biochemical link to how it's caused with the pharmaceutical medication involved. So,
amazing. And I see magnesium deficiency so many times, so often. And it could be as simple as just tiredness, poor sleep, muscle aches and pains, cramps. And I often say if you've got muscle cramps, you've got severe magnesium deficiency. And it could be also headaches, heavy periods, period pain. And it's a multitude of things. And the more I look into magnesium, it's one of the key mineral we need, and we lose it very quickly at times of stress. And so brilliant analysis of that. And it's so often, like from a doctor's perspective, PPIs are so frequently prescribed, almost like candy. When someone comes in going, right, I'll just put you on a PPI for 1 to 2 months. However, they may start using it long term without realizing it, because they may see another doctor, they get repeat prescriptions. And that's where it's really important for patients to be empowered and really go and get their medication reviewed. Because what I often see is it's just prescribed by a different doctor at various times, and they may actually not need it. So I think what you've highlighted is so important. And you probably see it as a pharmacist, how often PPIs are prescribed.
Oh, most definitely. It's one of the, like I said, one of the most prescribed medications. And you touched on a great point there. Because it fixes the problem almost within half an hour, it's a quick Band-Aid fix for people. So taking that one tablet every day that allows them to eat that spicy food, allows them to go to the pub and have an extra couple of drinks, things like that. It's more of a sort of a quick fix for people. And I think without knowing that quick fix can cause something detrimental longer term, and without empowering people to know that, then they'll never ever question that quick fix. Do you know what I mean? They may not seek other alternative methods. So
absolutely. Before we leave PPIs, I'd love for you to mention about B12 deficiency.
Definitely. So it's not just magnesium that it reduces it. So with PPIs, we could have an entire podcast on PPIs, to be honest with you, because like I said before, a reduction in acid that's required to break down foods, even if a person presents to your clinic or to your pharmacy saying, I'm on a great diet, I'm not on the traditional Western diet, I really look after myself. But like what you mentioned, if they're chronically stressed, if they're taking PPIs for a stress ulcer, for example, which, ulcers can be caused by chronic stress as well. and they're taking that as a band-aid fix like we talked about, they're not only getting magnesium deficiency, they're getting B12 deficiency, they're getting protein deficiency, amino acid deficiency, vitamin C deficiency. So even if they're having their 2 servings and 5 servings of fruit and vegetable every single day, and their protein's adequate and things like that, there's because they're not absorbing those foodstuffs, breaking down those foodstuffs into components and molecules that the gut lining, small intestine is able to absorb and then utilize at a cellular level, then it's not going to fix any issues and problems. And therefore, supplementation and the way, and we'll talk about this later on, supplementation in the way that clinicians prescribe, whether it's a GP doctor or integrative doctor or a specialist or even a naturopath, they really have to think about these things as well. Because let's touch on magnesium again. There's a lot of evidence to show that transdermal magnesium is actually more bioavailably and better absorbed than oral magnesium. And in someone that has gut issues like what we're talking about now, and is taking a PPI and has achlorhydria because of this, then transdermal magnesium may be the way to go, for example, for that patient. So you really have to sort of look at everything. But yeah, most definitely, it's not just B12, it's not just magnesium. Like I said, it's a whole plethora of nutrients and macromolecules that PPIs can cause in a long term.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to add on with B12 deficiency, what that may look like. It actually affects mental health, anxiety, affects mood, again, affects energy, affects
Most
sleep.
definitely.
And it's really quite important for listeners to know what that actually translates to on a day-to-day basis. But let's move on to the next group of medication.
So the one that I prepared as well, statins. Statins are the
Oh,
most
yes, love
widely
it.
prescribed. Yeah, they're the most widely prescribed for, I think, probably since atorvastatin came out, basically. As I mentioned, atorvastatin, simvastatin, rosuvastatin, just to give some names. I'm not sure what your audience is like. Maybe someone at home looking after mum and dad who just want to listen to the podcast, or there's also clinicians in here. So I'm sort of breaking it down for everybody. But as you can tell by the suffix statin, that's where they sort of get their name from. They're used in various cardiovascular disease, and they work via an enzyme, a rate-limiting enzyme step in HMG-CoA reductase. So they inhibit this enzyme, and it's involved in the mevalonate pathway. And the mevalonate pathway actually is the pathway that synthesizes endogenous cholesterol in the body. So the thing is, though, mevalonic acid, which is obviously, again, you can tell by the name, hopefully I'm not confusing anyone with the names, but it's part of this pathway, and it's a precursor that actually is a precursor to also CoQ10.
Right.
So
Okay.
by taking statins, you're also inadvertently reducing the levels of CoQ10. So by blocking these enzymes, you're also reducing CoQ10 in the serum. And evidence-based medicine and scientists and clinicians that have looked at this have also shown that it's dose dependent. So somebody taking 20 milligrams of, let's just call it atorvastatin, it gets increased to 80. That 80 milligrams is going to reduce CoQ10 in the serum a lot more than the 20 milligrams will. And the funny thing is that they've also shown that even by increasing to 80 milligrams, it's not much of a clinical benefit to the 20, but you're getting a high incidences or potentially high incidences of muscle weakness, cramping in people in taking statins, which that's the main symptoms presented to pharmacy, for example, and presented to clinicians as well. And that's the link, because CoQ10 is mainly looked at or mainly derived from in both smooth muscle, but more so concentrated in skeletal muscle. So people coming or patients presenting with those sorts of symptoms and side effects, there's your link right there with statins and CoQ10. And in those sorts of instances with myopathy, that type of myopathy, it generally warrants stopping and ceasing the medication and switching to something else. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I think many are familiar with that muscle aches and pains, but it's also fatigue, like really low energy, also mental health. Again, CoQ10 is needed for various processes in the body, but often we sort of link it to muscle fatigue, general fatigue. it's quite important as well.
Oh, 100%. CoQ10 is it's not only an antioxidant, but it's a cofactor in transport systems in all mitochondria. So, and mitochondria are your energy producing cells. So they're the things that synthesize ATP. So they're also, CoQ10 is also involved in the cell membrane bilipid layer. It's also involved in cellular growth and stimulation, also in apoptosis of cells. So it's also immunomodulatory, neuroprotective. I can keep going on. And that's where it sort of gets its antioxidant properties from. But because it's part of that, the synthesis in the mitochondria and part of those cofactors, that's where you're getting that reduction in energy from when you get a depletion in CoQ10, most definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I have to sort of say this, and it has to probably be another podcast, how quick statins are prescribed. And, that needs a whole different conversation. So it's actually worth just, seeing an integrative doctor and seeing, do I actually need the statins? Because it's something to be aware of, because it's prescribed again too often and over medicated. And there's so many doctors, cardiologists speaking out, like Dr. Ross Walker in Australia, but also Asim Malhotra wrote Statin Free Life. And there's actually quite a few books out there. So it's worth exploring if you're on statins.
100%. Yeah, Dr. Ross Walker's been a massive advocate for all of the stuff that we're talking about. And also with that, look, that's what's great about science and sort of medicine, that we as clinicians and healthcare professionals, we're always got our brains sort of thinking, and we never stop studying, even though we wish we sort of did.
Absolutely. I'm still learning.
Yeah, always. You're not learning every day, then you're sort of stagnant in this game, that's for sure. But I think most definitely they're showing now it's more of an inflammatory process, so rather than a hyperlipidemic sort of process. So interesting field, and something to keep a track of, definitely.
Yeah. So what should we move on to next, Ves?
So the next thing that I've got is it's not a group per se, but it's a widely prescribed medication, and it's becoming a lot more popular and off-label for a lot of things. It's metformin, basically. So metformin, as you know, is mainly used for type 2 diabetes, and in some instances, gestational diabetes. It's got a massive mode of action, and every year each new mode of action is found that, because it's been studied at a very high level, only because the hot topic now is to increase everyone's life expectancy.
Oh, that's true.
And there's been a lot of research done, even by Australian scientists, that metformin has been shown to sort of help in rat models to increase their life expectancy. So we're getting it prescribed more and more now off-label for that particular, well, I'm not even going to call it an ailment. It's more of a sort of a cosmetic thing, I think. So for people wanting to look younger and feel younger and things like that. So, but basically how it works is it crosses the cell membrane of liver and gut cells through an organic transporters or cation transporters. Again, in the once it gets into the mitochondria, it inhibits a multitude of processes, but mainly adenosine monophosphate, so AMP, and also AMP activated protein kinase, so that's AMPK. By increasing the expression of both of these endogenous molecules, it leads to better glucose and lipid metabolism from the liver. It also leads to better insulin sensitivity, and also it shows a great reduction in inflammation. And I think that's where it's getting it sort of increasing life expectancy from. So the less inflammation that we have and the less we can keep it down chronically, then the younger we feel and the more life expectancy we basically get. But these are the reasons why it's first-line medication in type 2 diabetes. However, it's saying all the good things about metformin, it doesn't go without its sort of deleterious effects. And unfortunately, it's been moderately to severely shown to deplete B12 and folate absorption. So B12 and folate have various roles within the body, like we talked about with B12. However, their main role is essentially in DNA methylation and genomic expression. They affect cellular programming in both adults and unborn fetuses, studies have shown, and hence why, especially in diabetic mothers wanting to conceive, preconception with higher doses of folate, folinic acid, and B12 is highly recommended in diabetic patients that are wanting to conceive, especially in patients that have or unfortunately get gestational diabetes as well. But yeah, in this instance, because of that link there between genomic expression and it's involved in DNA methylation, it's probably not the go-to, in my opinion, for someone that is pregnant in that instance anyway.
Mm.
Because like you said, B12 is involved in a lot of neuronal processes as well. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I loved how you said about longevity using metformin and it goes down to inflammation. But guess what? Stress causes inflammation, junk food, processed foods, poor sleep, and also metformin is prescribed to patients with PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome. But it all goes back to insulin, all goes back to insulin resistance and inflammation. And you can reverse that. You can reverse that with diet and lifestyle, and you don't need a pill because that's still a band-aid. It's
Definitely.
still a band-aid and it comes with all its side effects as well.
I agree. Wholeheartadly agree. Yep. There's studies that have shown that when you reduce your insulin-like growth factor sort of pathway, which is the very pro-inflammatory pathway in animal models, it's shown that once that's suppressed and reduced, then their life expectancy and their basically their way of life, the way that they move around in the rodent models, they're just a lot better than the others that are fed the quote unquote regular Western diet, sedentary lifestyle, everything that you sort of just mentioned. So I agree wholeheartedly.
Amazing. So what should we move on to next, Ves?
We are going to talk about, I think, one that you've probably come across a lot because this is in your realm, I think, SSRIs.
Yes, absolutely. Again,
Yeah,
so easily, quickly prescribed without a proper consultation around it.
definitely. And I like that you always keep mentioning that because that's all that's really needed. So a sit down, not a 15-minute, not, proper consultation where from head to toe, the clinicians looked at sort of every single avenue rather than just pinpointing the symptoms and then basically going, okay, this is what I'm going to give you for these sets of symptoms. So, but yeah, SSRIs are also known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, things like fluoxetine, sertraline, citalopram. And like you've just mentioned, they're willy-nilly sort of prescribed for any sort of anxiety or depression or any sort of neurohormonal disorder, but they work very sort of non-specifically blocking nearly all serotonin transporters. So they block all SERTs. That's what those serotonin transporters are called. And they're part of a family called the neurotransmitter sodium symporter family, which require sodium to actually function. So blocking these SERTs increases the concentration of serotonin inside of the synaptic cleft and postsynaptically as well. And therefore, they can affect and have a wide variety of adverse effects throughout not only the nervous system, but throughout our gastrointestinal system as well. And that's why they've got such a wide sort of side effect profile, if you will. But nevertheless, and more specifically, in individuals with an imbalance in an antidiuretic sort of hormone, SSRIs can actually significantly lead to hyponatremia,
Oh,
which
wow.
is actually one of the first. It's actually one of the first signs of serotonin syndrome, believe it or not. And as you know, and as most clinicians know, and we learned this at university, serotonin syndrome can be a sort of a life-threatening and serious effect. But if you can spot the signs of this very early symptom and side effect in hyponatremia, then the medication can be ceased and things can be done to stop it from actually being life-threatening to the patient. And some scientists are even suggesting that there's a link between this unspecific binding and binding throughout the whole entire physiology throughout our serotonin receptors with sodium depletion. And that's why it could be the start of that life-threatening event in serotonin syndrome. And as you know as well, the old saying is you sort of are what you eat, and science is sort of catching up with that with the gut-brain barrier link and things like that as well. And new studies are also emerging to show that SSRIs can also cause dysbiosis of our gut microbiome. So, and that's also because we've got a vast neural network of serotonin signaling pathways throughout our whole entire gastrointestinal system. So that's something to obviously, as a clinician, keep up to breast with, because the pharmacological and biochemical actions as to how this actually occurs is unknown, but it's been shown through testing that they do cause a great disruption in our gut microbiome, which can also obviously lead to a disruption in many other hormones and side effects. So,
Is it also lower magnesium? I was reading somewhere.
I did. I was going to touch on that, but sorry, I just bumped the table. But the evidence on magnesium. So in this podcast, I've really focused on stuff with evidence-based backing. So things that anyone listening can jump onto a search engine like PubMed, like a medicinal search engine, type in the keywords that we've talked about and sort of do the research themselves. So magnesium, there is some work on that, but the stuff that I've sort of mentioned here with
More.
with hyponatremia and with dysbiosis, there most definitely is a plethora of studies showing that it can contribute to it moderately to even sometimes significantly in patients.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Were there any other types of medication we wanted to talk about, Res?
I had antibiotics, and I think I know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think before the podcast, if we had time, I also was going to touch on oral contraceptives, but it's
Yes.
up to you with how much we've got time. So,
Absolutely. We need to talk about both of them because again, it's
yeah,
commonly prescribed. Yeah.
no problem. So, yeah, antibiotics, as everybody knows, depending on the group of antibiotics and depending on the type of bacteria you want to treat, they're going to work in a variety of different ways, from disrupting, the development of the bacterial cell membrane to inhibiting essential proteins that are involved in bacterial DNA synthesis. However, all of them will cause a significant level of dysbiosis, even in a short course of antibiotic course. So that's not including someone who's, hey, for example, has their spleen removed and they need to be on amoxicillin for the rest of their life, basically. And the things that go on unaddressed with this is simple replacement of the gut bacteria that you're disrupting. I know for a fact, I've seen it in pharmacy where, there's just no prescription of any probiotics or cofactors that help the natural bacteria grow and flourish, especially when you're giving something chronically like amoxicillin for the rest of their life expectancy. But a lot of clinicians don't know that, a lot of healthcare providers don't know that there's specific types of bacteria that actually produce vitamin K in our bodies. So the non-specific actions of antibiotics, which sort of get rid of obviously what we want them to get rid of, which is the sinister pathogen causing the condition, but they inadvertently also get rid of bacteria that are very helpful to our physiology. And these vitamin K producing microbiota, it can actually cause a significant vitamin K deficiency in susceptible individuals. So people that take warfarin, for example, people that have liver insufficiency, people that are born with innately low hepatic storage of vitamin K, they should all be sort of monitored when given even a 7 to 10 day course of antibiotics. In some instances, especially in the cases of warfarin, because warfarin works and functions via vitamin K coagulation pathway. As we know, vitamin K is also called the fat soluble sort of blood coagulation vitamin because of its role in thromboembolic sort of events. And that's why warfarin is prescribed. But cephalosporins especially should be sort of not even maybe prescribed in people that have high doses of warfarin, because not only will they get rid of those bacteria that help produce vitamin K, but they actually actively interfere with vitamin K activity. And therefore that compounds the matter and can cause thromboembolic events that we sort of don't want in those types of patients. So,
and if you could explain thromboembolic for those for the listeners who don't know.
Yeah. So basically, it's literally just a pathway that's involved in coagulation, which is basically blood sticking or blood forming together. So the vitamin K, which is involved in that, is an essential cofactor in carboxylation and activation of various blood coagulation proteins. And that's why it's called sort of the blood clotting vitamin. So it's the stickiness of blood, basically. So we want blood to be as smooth and as free-flowing as possible through our blood vessels. In some instances, we want it to be sticky. So when you've cut yourself, you want the blood to be sticky. And that's where you get the process of coagulation to put a plug on the wound so that the body and the immunological sort of pathways can do their work. In most other instances, though, we don't want sticky blood. So we want the blood to cross smoothly through vessels and valves so that we don't get things like strokes and things like bleeds and stuff like that. So
Amazing. And I think before we finish off, love to hear about contraceptive pills. Again, extremely commonly prescribed.
Oh, most definitely. So yeah, it was the 5 or 6 group that we've touched on today, believe it or not, cover about 50 to 100 of the most commonly prescribed medications on the PBS. So oral contraceptives are definitely one of those. So things like Levelin, Yasmin, Slender, They're all used for a wide variety of conditions. So namely, we call them oral contraceptives for a reason, because contraception is their main use, but they're also used in things like PCOS, endometriosis, other hormonal issues as well. And because of the structure and the amount of different chemical, biosynthetic sort of chemicals and hormones that are inside them, they act on a multitude of receptors or hormonal receptors. So because they've got derivatives of estrogen, estradiol, progesterones, etc., they act throughout the whole hormonal system in females taking them. So apart from potentially depleting numerous nutrients, like the ones that we've talked about today as well. So OCPs can reduce various B vitamins, so from B12 to B6. It can reduce vitamin C. It can also reduce zinc in people taking them, especially chronically. But the main focus and the most evidence that's behind them, because of the side effects that can cause, the serious side effects. That's why whenever there's a serious side effects, a lot more research goes into the why as to as what it's caused. So they greatly reduce serum folate and magnesium. And as we've talked about folate's produced in a multitude of sort of pathways. It's basically a nutrient that protects the cell and is involved in controlled cellular death, if you will, another term for apoptosis. So there's evidence to suggest that because it reduces the free folate level to go or concentration to go into the cells, scientists have suggested or put a causal link between cervical dysplasia and then women taking that, and then over obviously years and years and years, and that cervical dysplasia then leading towards cervical cancer, for example.
Wow.
And the link again between magnesium is not widely as known as the folic acid. However, magnesium also has an essential role in what we just talked about before, the thromboembolic pathways. And unfortunately, women, we know that you're not only meant to be prescribed for 7 years, but due to various sort of environmental reasons and psychological reasons and conditions, women take OCPs for a lot longer than 7 years. I know that for a fact because I've seen it myself. And unfortunately, because magnesium's involved in these thromboembolic pathways, women taking it for a lot longer without this nutrient deficiency addressed, it's led to things such as stroke in really young women. Yeah, unfortunately, I've seen that firsthand in my hospital placements and things like that. So, and there's again that link between an unfortunate rare side effect and the potential root cause of that side effect that might have been sort of, and quite possibly may have been reversed if proper supplementation was given. So.
Really, it's interesting you mentioned about how long women take contraceptives. I've had women take contraceptives for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's just ongoing from their 20s right to their 40s or even longer once they reach perimenopause. So it's almost shocking to hear, the limit is 7 years, but majority take it much longer. And another thing I want to add is I've seen so many women who feel anxious or depressed on contraceptives, and often they don't connect the dots. And it is because of that folate B vitamin deficiency, because that's so important for mental health. And once you address that, they feel so much better. But it's not as simple as, right, I'm just going to stop help with period control or contraceptives. It's really important to know what else it does, because it has so many other side effects as well.
Definitely. And with that too, like I said, we could have a series, because where does it stop? There's evidence to show that long term they cause fibroids. And if you have fibroids on your liver, then you're affecting the way that your natural hormones are produced, and then you're affecting a whole plethora of other things. And fibroids also, they can interfere with the cytochrome P450 system of enzymes, causing induction and all sorts of an inhibition of other enzymes and things. And where does it stop after that? Like, it could just keep going for forever and ever.
Absolutely. And, we talked about separate groups of drugs. Many are actually on a lot of the drugs that you've just told me about.
Yeah.
So, and that's also compounded effect in terms of side effects and nutrient depletion. But Ves, this has been incredible, so informative, and so important to get out there so people are aware. And what I'd love to advise my listeners is work with an integrative doctor or a functional medicine GP or a GP that is aware of nutrient deficiency, so we know how to manage the medication versus the nutrient depletion, or someone like Ves, to be honest, because I think you've got a very unique education of pharmacy and naturopathy, so you can connect the dots as well.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I think this is where, like I said, my passion's been integrative medicine ever since I started. So this is where I think healthcare barriers can be broken. Do you know what I mean? So working together collaboratively with like-minded healthcare professionals that see this as a real problem, a serious issue and a problem, and they can work together with the patient's overall health status at the forefront of their minds by working together with pharmacists, naturopaths, integrative doctors, specialists. You're all able to contribute in your own special way and be able to sort of get to that root cause of the problem, because it's none of this is a band-aid fix. It's a root cause problem issue. And once the roots, obviously, of a tree are taken out, then there's nothing there anymore to stop the issue from spreading. So that's what you sort of want to concentrate and look at, definitely.
Amazing, Ves. Thank you so much for your time today. But before we leave you, where can people find you? And I'll add a link in the show notes.
Yeah, no problem. So like I said, I'm at Deer Park Compounding Pharmacy now. We are building a really cool integrative center there. We've just sort of started. We do a lot of nutraceuticals for a wide variety of healthcare professionals, and we obviously do the pharmacy side of things too. We've got consult rooms in there as well. So I'm going to be starting my naturopathic consultations inside the pharmacy there too. So yeah, you can find me there at Deer Park Compounding Pharmacy, and also at Pier Street Chiropractic Clinic in Altona. So that's basically where I'm at now, and it's an exciting part in my time and my journey now to hopefully, it's been such a long road in pharmacy and getting to where sort of I want healthcare to sort of go to. But I think finally now, with people such as yourself, good Dr. Shami as well, I think integrative doctors can also lead the way. And I think that's the way as well, because you guys are the leaders in healthcare, doctors and specialists, and we need more doctors and specialists like yourself to promote integrative healthcare, nutritional healthcare, good food, etc., good lifestyles. And that's the way we're going to make people holistically better without any sort of band-aid fixes. So, and I think compounding pharmacy especially has a role in that, because we can tailor make things to the particular person for that particular person. And it's not just a sort of blanket overall broad prescription given. So, yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for today, Ves.
No problem. Thanks, Dr. Shami. Cheers.
Remember that this is general advice only. Please see your healthcare professional for more information. So what's your take-home message today? Remember, it's all about progress and not perfection. And are you suffering from stress? Visit the Usawa Learning Hub on usawa.com.au for more resources on how to de-stress, re-energize, and reclaim your health. Enjoy the journey.